Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. In this Season 12 premiere episode, follow Jon Andersen of Andersen Log Homes based out of Walker, Minnesota, as he creates a beautiful log home for a world-renowned photographer.
My name's Joel Sartore. I'm a photographer for National Geographic, actually, and I specialize in wildlife. So we're standing at the log home we're having built near Deerwood, Minnesota. This is something that's near and dear to our heart. It's out in the woods. There's a lot of birds, woodpeckers and loons and ducks and migrating warblers, so it's perfect for me in terms of just being able to see a good part of the country that still has its original complement of birds. That's important to me. We decided to build a log home because my wife grew up going to Stony Point Resort, which is no longer in existence, on Leech Lake.
Coming from Nebraska, every summer we'd vacation with my folks up in northern Minnesota at Leech Lake. And to me, when I heard the word Minnesota, it meant heaven. It was everything that I loved. Swimming, this new crop of animals. We saw bear and eagles and loons, just things that weren't typical in Nebraska. And just the weather was cool, it was beautiful, scenery, the woods, just, I was in love. So we came every year, stayed in log cabins.
And she went up there since she was a little kid, since she was a baby, and then I started going up there with her and her family on their vacations every July for the past 35 years. And Stony Point Resort doesn't exist anymore, so we had to do our own thing.
We brought our kids here after my folks were gone. Joel's brother married a girl whose parents live in Cross Lake, so there were all these things that were keeping us coming to Minnesota. I finally said, we just need to have a place of our own here so that we can come anytime we want.
We ended up choosing Jon Andersen as the shell builder, the guy who gets the logs and carves the logs and fits them together, because we could see his work from the highway south of Walker.
I'm Jon Andersen of Andersen Log Homes, and I build handcrafted log homes, and we're currently in our model log home that we built 25 years ago with a dream and a vision, and these were all my extra logs for 2 years. And we made it into a house, which is really cool. Where I started in the cities, I was building stick houses. I was so appalled that I quit because they were almost firing me for sticking a level on there. And I said, I'm not gonna do anything that you don't, well, leave it to the finishers. And I'd say, no, the finishers, you make it level and have the finishers be able to do their job a lot better, easier. So I wanted to do something really unique. I didn't know what that was. But as soon as I started doing handcrafted log homes, I just knew that this was for me.
Jon Andersen is my husband, and the same year we got married, we started Andersen Log Homes. So we've been building log homes for 30 years together. So I do the bookend part of it, and he does the craftsman part of it.
I started in 1980, and I was I had done 2 years at Bemidji State University, and I was looking for summer work. And I met a log home builder out of British Columbia. And he asked me if I wanted to peel logs, and that very much interested me because my folks had a log home built in the 1920s, and I thought it was pretty fascinating. And so I started with him.
We looked online a lot. We looked for a long time, and there's just nobody even compared to the guy. Plus, he's super nice, and his wife, they're both great. And then Joel Sutton's the guy that takes that shell and finishes it, and he's really the best in the business. He drew the plans himself by hand. I mean, these people are at their peak of strength. They both have been doing this for decades. They are relatively young still, and they know what they're doing. They've done this dozens and dozens of times, so I felt like we were getting a couple of real craftsmen to both join up and make this house the way they wanted to.
Back in 2018, Joel and Kathy Sartore were interested in building a log home, so they met with Jon. They toured our model home, and they toured a couple other log homes so they could see if it's a right fit for them. Because not every person wants a handcrafted log home versus a milled log home. It's kind of like apples and oranges. You can't compare them.
Yeah, I thought the whole thing was really cool because he called me he called and asked for to set up an appointment. And I didn't know. He said his name is Joel Sartore, Joel and Kathy Sartore. And I didn't know him, who they were. He was just a very polite man. And we showed him some of our houses, and they seemed to really enjoy them, the size of the logs and the unique way we fit.
Joel and I both thought this would be the thing to do, is actually build a home that is specifically what we want, what we're looking for in a place that we choose. We loved the idea of a handmade home, hand-built, that it would last 200 years, hopefully. And so we thought this is the way to go. And we loved that Jon and Beth were doing everything themselves, and they hired college kids in the summer to peel the logs. It was ideal for us. We thought it was the perfect fit.
What was really cool was he came over by the logs, and he was looking at, he said, "What is one thing you would like to do before you're done building?" So I went over, I showed him one of the biggest logs we had. It was like 32 inches. And I said, "I want to do a log home with at least this size of logs, every log in the house. One more." And he said, "Done."
In fact, that was one of the things we said to them was, do the kind of house that you want to do. Make it look like a Hobbit house if you want to. Just do something that you'll be really proud of. You can kind of have your way with this thing. And they did.
And that's the other thing that I thought was really neat, that he said, "What would you say if I gave you complete creative control over the log work?" So it was nice. They had a blueprint, but we talked a lot about the different aspects of it with the big logs. And it was pretty neat.
So, when you enter into an agreement to build a home, you really become a partner just overnight with the home builders.
Right after we agreed on the big logs, it wasn't 2 days after, I get a call from a logger that I hadn't talked to in 25 years that I'd gotten logs from, and he said, "Jon, there's only one guy I could think of that would want logs this big, and I called you." So I went up there by Rhinelander, and I went in the woods and marked 34 trees, and that was enough to do the whole house. They were so big.
When Jon met the logger for these logs, for the Sartores log home, he went in and they were doing hand select cutting. So they were picking and choosing select logs that would work for the home. They don't clear cut on the site there. So they're picking the specific ones that need to be thinned out for a natural selection and harvest. So then it'll have regrowth coming back in.
When I go into marked trees, I always make sure it's not a clear-cut situation. It's just where we go in and pick a tree here and there for the sustainability of the forest. By picking cabin logs, it works out well because you're just taking a tree here and there. When I left, after we picked these trees, you wouldn't even know we were in there. There were so many trees left. We all felt good about it because we knew that by dragging these trees out, it'd scrape up the ground, and then by that happening, a bunch of new trees would come. When we first get the logs in, what we do is what we call debarking, and they're handmade tools that you take a strip down the middle and you work underneath the cambium layer, and the bark comes off in sheets. And then after that, we move it to bunks for a period of drying out. and then we hand peel them after that. We have a gentleman that works for us named Gary Hill, and he does a great job for us peeling and debarking.
I mean, it's a pretty slow process.
When he's seen this, and he's never complains about anything, and he looks at these big logs, and but he actually did them, and we were all kind of enthralled with the prospect of doing something unique once. So we went into the mindset that we are only going to do this once. So I kept saying that, just think when this is over, we're going to have smaller logs that are more manageable. But he did a wonderful job.
Each log home is pre-built on our job site. A lot of that is we have the equipment here, we've got the tools, the travel is shorter for employees, and that there's a large area for each home to be built on. Typically, you need a large area to lay out the trees, the bunks. Some places that we built homes for are on cliffs. You know, there's not much room for the log homes to go on, much less equipment. So it's been a really good experience to have our building site here in Walker.
When we started building this log home, it was a winter project for us. Wintertime creates its own challenges by the frost on the logs. We're dealing with frost, and you sweep off one layer of frost and you get another layer. So you're dealing with walking on these logs, rolling them, and at the same time, it's part of the challenge. In this particular winter, we had a lot of snow and a lot of cold. And between Jason Island, who works for me, is the best guy I've ever had, by the way. Him and I would just be out there every day, you know, and with each challenge, that the snow, you'd have to blow it off, and then the frost, you'd have to sweep it off, and then you only got 8 hours of sunlight. But it was fun. It was a good challenge for us.
The winter that we built the Sartore log home was really cold. It was the year that it was probably the most below zero and the most snow. It's hard, it's more dangerous, it feels more dangerous. It's just hard. You know, when I watch Jon and Jason work in these winter conditions, it's really difficult. They're dealing with the wind blowing, the cold air. You know, the other part too is the guys will always say, in the wintertime, you can take off layers of clothes and you can warm up, but in the summertime, you can't cool off anymore. But that winter that they built the Sartores, it was extremely cold. It's hard on the equipment, it's hard on your hands. It takes more time just to get the tractor ready. It takes more time to do everything, so the process is slower. Preparation each day, depending on if it snowed or if there's ice, you have to make sure there's no ice on there. If it froze, you can't walk up on top. Once you get a certain height up, you can't walk on top for safety purposes. But they manage well. Jon and Jason make building log homes look super easy. I have tried to go chop a notch, and it's really, really hard. They make it look like you're cutting through butter. So it's very difficult work.
When we first start, we start with half logs and 3/4 logs, which we split with the chainsaw. We do all our cutting with the chainsaw. And then when we notch them, you want to be what we call half and half. You want about half the log sticking up after it gets notched down, so you can notch the next log into it. And it's just something that's unique because you have to figure out always the heights and the notch heights, and you have to make sure it works for the next one. You're not just thinking about the log you're on, but the one that comes after that, and how is that going to fit on top of it. So the unique challenge of these homes has always been what log goes where. And every log to me has a place in the house. And what I do is walk around the yard 10, 15 times a day studying every log. And then I make a mental note when I'm going to use this log. And I always go, okay, that'll be a good plate log, or we can cut this log here, and then we get 2 nice straight logs in a window or door opening. What's really neat is I was involved with some of the first Scribers that happened. And we went from, there was an evolution there, from a marker taped onto a dividers. And then you keep your wrist locked in place, to the Scribers we have nowadays, which have bubbles on them so you can see the level both directions, up and down and sideways. So you set that to the distance, the top log to the bottom log. That's how we know how much to cut the first log.
This is called a knot scriber, and we use it for the final scribe, the rough scribe, and the final scribe, and we're on the final scribe now. Jason. And this is the lateral scriber, which gets between the logs, and you set them at the same distance.
So we set the logs up, and we call this a rough notch. And we do a rough notch to get it down close enough to scribe the top log to fit onto the bottom log. So in that rough notch, we set them up there, and we use a block on one end so it's the same level as the notch. And then we scribe our notch, and then we cut it out. With an interlocking V-notch, we make a series of cuts, which we knock out with generally our foot or a hatchet, and then we make undercuts, and then we do the mallet and chisel. So you got a V on the bottom and a V on the top, and that locks it in place. And in that area, we also insulate in each notch, and between each log, we have what's called a Swedish cope. You're scribing the top log to fit into the bottom log. And it's in essence like a V. It's a 4 to 6 inch area, which we fully insulated between the logs as well. Well, you got the top log sitting on the log below, and then you take your scribers and you set the distance between that top log and the bottom log. And that's what your original scribe is. And then you scribe the notch, and then cut the finish notch, and then roll them back over. And then you got a space between the logs, and you go by your biggest spot. And then you got 2 different scribers, the scribe for the notches, and then another scriber we have for the laterals that we use, and we set them both at the same height for the finish scribe. And so you know how far you're taking the notch down and how far you're taking the log down. And then we pull those off, and then we do all the final cutting. I'd like to say Jason Ireland, who started, he just been with us 17 years now. And I want to say that he's the best guy I've ever had, not only as a person, but as a log craftsman, truly a craftsman. He's the only guy I've ever had that I would say that's an Andersen log home. We make a very good team. We can not speak all day and know what to expect out of the other person through hand gestures, through raising your head up or lowering it. When you work with someone long enough, you develop a chemistry, and we developed a special chemistry that only time can do. And most people, honestly, this isn't for most people. Just by the physical nature of it, you gotta be artistic, you gotta be athletic to be able to jump and lift, and strong enough to lift this saw, as well as be smart enough to be gentle enough. You're following intricate lines, and there's no room for error. So you have to put a lot of thought behind what you're doing, and you have to be aware because of the dangers of this. Gary Hill was also working with us, and he did such a fantastic job on the peeling and debarking. For 7 years he did that. Now we're moving him up. At Andersen Log Home, everyone starts off peeling, including myself. And the reason for this is because you cannot appreciate something unless you've done it. And it's one of the hardest things you can do physically is peel these logs. And that's how I started. So I think it's really important for anyone who works here to start at that phase, the peeling and then the debarking, and so they can appreciate that. And then they do a good job, and then they move up to the log homes.
What I find interesting when they're doing the rough notch, they're cutting in, and they don't have to be super specific. They are very specific, but once they do the notch, they roll it back out, put it back in. Before they put it back in the second time, it's the final cut. It's all with the chisel, the mallet. And that's where the precision is in there. So it's like they get to do the chainsaws, it's more rough cut, but then they have the finesse of getting it to fit really well. And on the lateral cut, when they open it up, it's also called the Swedish coat, but that's the underside, and that's the scribe to fit the log on top that it goes back on top of. But that's all cut with the chainsaw, but then before that's done, it's all done by axe and hand. So each thing has to go back, and you have an axe, and it's all done by hand, that part, to get that tight fit. Or I want to say that's what makes us a little different, where it is a tight fit, and it's, you know, we take the time to make it right.
Yeah, in March, we're starting to see the building take shape. When you get to the 5th course, particularly with these big logs, you're getting to the header logs that go across the doors and windows, and you're starting to feel the shape of the building. You're getting towards the finish line, and it's getting exciting. You're getting ready for the loft to go in and cut the roof logs. And then everyone, I think, starts getting excited when you start going across the doors and windows, especially these big logs. And it really was taking shape at that point. The unique part about when we did these large logs, and I knew it would be a challenge, of these 34 trees, we had 20 of them that were 68 foot long. And on the top end, or the small end, they all average between 18 and 20 inches on the small end. Typically, 18 to 20 is large on the big end of the log. It was a real challenge as far as the weight and the heaviness of them, moving them around. My guys asked me, how are we going to do this? And I said, just like I was trained, you just do it, and you figure out ways to do it. And we have little tricks, is what I like to call them. There's a trick for everything. My old boss used to say, oh, I know a trick for that one. So I said, I'll have a trick, we'll be ready. And it took a while, but it was challenging, but I figured out how to drag them around and then be able to lift them up. And when you deal with something that's up to 40 inches on one end and down to 20, you got, you know, and you got 6 rounds. 6 rounds was 11 feet tall, and our normal height is 9. It was just the sheer diameter of what you gain with each log versus normally we would use 2 instead of the 1, you know, so it was a challenge, but it worked out really well.
When the log home is completed on our site, typically you have to have at least 3 people. We've done it with 2. The trailers get all set. They take it apart, bring it back on. So they do one by one. Some people want to call it like the Lincoln log. Someone's on the load, where they're getting the logs down, someone's in the tractor, and then someone's on the ground. But where each one is centered is really specific, because the weight distribution, you have to get it off well and get it on well. So the top roof log goes down first, and depending on the size of the home, like the Sartores took 3 loads. They fill the logs up, and Jerry with Jerry's Crane and Hauling will actually bring out each log and stage them. So they're staged, so we know which one goes where, and they're staged to go back together on the homeowner site too.
When we take a building apart, it's unique in that we have to get these logs on these trailers and fit a whole house on there, and only go so high on each trailer. What log goes where, just to fit it onto the trailer. And I've always worked the trailers ever since I started, and now Gary Hill is, and he's done a wonderful job. But that's a unique challenge in itself. Jerry Freeman did the crane and the trucking for us, and he also owns one of our log homes. And he loves the uniqueness of it too, all the aspects from loading it to hauling it. And he's been just an outstanding crane operator, and he always goes to each site before we move, understands each challenge and has a trick.
The Sartores log home is a beautiful log home. It was really fun watching it go back together on their site.
We like this location because it's out on a peninsula and it's very isolated and quiet, peaceful, and I get enough excitement with my job, so it's nice to be someplace where it's just really relaxing.
One of the coolest things about what I do is taking an imperfect thing like a big log or different shapes and sizes, especially white pine that we use. It really doesn't grow like round, and be able to take something and sculpt it into a home where you got to get the heights exactly right. And it's always a challenge and a unique challenge, and the logs themselves are always different. Each one is different and a unique challenge.
When we put a log home back together, it's exciting. It's like the big day. Everybody's really having fun and getting ready. We get out there. I'm part of the installation crew. So we get the installation ready. Out on the side, you've got the general contractor with his crew who does an awesome job. So they're getting the subfloor prepped and getting the gables off and just getting ready for the day to begin.
Everyone who worked on this project really had fun with it, even though it was so much work. Because of the uniqueness, even the loggers, when the logs came in, everyone wanted pictures by these logs, because it was just, everyone recognized this was kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime deal. You're not going to see this. And I'm not going to do one like this with the logs that big again, but I wanted to do one more, and I'm really thankful I did.
Thank you so much for watching. Join us again next week on Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in north central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click local shows. Episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.